This number has been blocked, the automated voice said after the fourth time I tried calling my son on my 70th birthday. I stood there in my kitchen holding the phone against my ear while the roast dried out in the oven and the candles on the dining room table burned lower and lower. For a moment, I honestly thought I had dialed the wrong number. Ryan had never blocked me before. Not after my husband died. Not after all the years I spent helping him through college, through his divorce scare 3 years ago, through every late-night phone call when life overwhelmed him. My son didn't block me. At least that was what I kept telling myself while I stared at the untouched birthday cake, sitting in the center of the table. The white frosting had begun to soften slightly under the warm dining room lights, and the silver number candles tilted to one side like they were tired of waiting too. I checked the clock again. 9:47 p.m. Dinner had been planned for 6. I had spent 3 days preparing for it. 3 days cleaning the house, polishing the good silverware Arthur bought for our 25th anniversary, folding cloth napkins the way my mother taught me back in Ohio when I was a girl. I even wore lipstick for the first time in months. Soft rose pink. Arthur used to say it made me look elegant. The mashed potatoes were cold now. The green beans had gone limp. I had reheated the roast twice already because I kept believing headlights would appear in the driveway at any second. Ryan always loved my pot roast. Ever since he was 10 years old, he'd ask for seconds before he even finished his first plate. I glanced toward the front window again, but the street outside remained still and empty under the yellow glow of the streetlights. Not one car. Not one text message. Nothing. Earlier that afternoon, Vanessa had sent me a short message confirming they were coming. See you tonight, smiley face, just that. Nothing unusual. Nothing cold enough to prepare me for this feeling spreading slowly through my chest now. It wasn't anger at first. It was embarrassment. The kind that creeps over you quietly when you realize you've been the only person holding on to something everyone else already let go of. I walked into the dining room and adjusted one of the plates even though it didn't need adjusting. 7 place settings surrounded the mahogany table. Ryan, Vanessa, my grandkids Chloe and Mason, my sister Diane, her husband Frank, and me. I had even printed little menu cards because Chloe once told me fancy dinners made her feel like she was in a movie. I looked at her empty chair the longest. Then I called Ryan again. Blocked. I swallowed hard and set the phone face down beside Arthur's old chair at the head of the table. His reading glasses still rested there beside a folded newspaper from 2 weeks ago. Sometimes I couldn't bring myself to move his things. The silence in the house felt heavier since he passed. Bigger somehow. Like grief had stretched the walls farther apart. Arthur would have known something was wrong the second Vanessa sent that text. He always noticed things I missed. Especially when it came to people. A memory surfaced suddenly, sharp enough to make my stomach tighten. Last year, after Thanksgiving dinner, Arthur stood beside me at the sink while I wrapped leftovers in foil. Vanessa was laughing too loudly in the living room while Ryan carried dishes to the kitchen. Arthur leaned close and quietly said, "That woman doesn't want family, Helen. She wants control." I laughed it off back then. Tonight, standing alone in my birthday dress while my phone sat useless beside me, I realized my husband may have understood my daughter-in-law long before I ever did. I did not clean the kitchen that night. I could not bring myself to scrape untouched food into plastic containers or blow out the candles that had burned themselves into puddles of wax across the dining room table. Instead, I turned off the oven, slipped off my shoes, and sat alone in the dark living room with only the light from the television flickering across the walls. I was not really watching anything. Some late-night game show host laughed too loudly while contestants spun a giant wheel, but the sound felt distant, almost unreal. My eyes kept drifting toward my cell phone resting face down on the coffee table beside me. I told myself Ryan would call. Eventually. Maybe there had been an accident on the highway. Maybe one of the children got sick. Maybe Vanessa had blocked my number by mistake while trying to block spam calls. I kept building little excuses for them the way mothers do when they are not ready to face the truth. Around midnight, I finally stood up and walked back into the dining room. The house smelled faintly of rosemary, onions, and the birthday candles I had bought that afternoon at the grocery store. Everything looked frozen in place. 7 untouched water glasses. 7 folded napkins. 7 empty chairs surrounding a dinner no one cared enough to attend. I reached over and picked up the small menu card beside Ryan's plate. Helen's 70th birthday dinner. Prime rib roast. Garlic mashed potatoes. Green beans almondine. Lemon cake. I had printed them on thick cream-colored paper because I wanted the evening to feel special. Important. My fingers trembled slightly as I set the card back down. Then I noticed something strange. The family group chat on my phone was gone. At first I thought I had accidentally deleted it, but after scrolling through my messages twice, I realized it had disappeared completely. The thread where Chloe used to send me photos of her soccer games. The thread where Mason once asked me if turtles could get lonely. Gone. A cold feeling settled slowly into my stomach. I opened Facebook almost without thinking. I rarely posted anything myself, but I like seeing pictures of the grandchildren. The first thing that appeared at the top of my feed was a photo Vanessa had uploaded less than an hour earlier. Ryan stood beside her wearing a navy sweater I bought him for Father's Day 2 years ago. Chloe and Mason smiled in front of a massive stone fireplace wrapped in white string lights. Behind them stretched rows of vineyard hills glowing gold beneath the sunset. Napa Valley. My chest tightened as I stared at the caption underneath the photo. Perfect family weekend getaway with the people who matter most. There were already dozens of comments underneath it. Heart emojis. Friends calling them beautiful. Vanessa replying to everyone with cheerful little messages while I sat alone in my silent house staring at cold food and melted birthday candles. I zoomed in on the picture before I even realized I was doing it. Ryan looked happy. Not guilty. Not distracted. Happy. That hurt more than anything else. I set the phone down carefully on the table beside Arthur's reading glasses, and suddenly remembered another small thing I had ignored a few months earlier. Chloe's school choir concert. Vanessa told me the event had been moved to Thursday night, but when I arrived at the auditorium parking lot, the building was dark and empty. Later, Diane mentioned how beautiful Chloe's solo had been on Wednesday. Vanessa apologized afterward and claimed she mixed up the dates. At the time, I believed her because believing her hurt less than the alternative. But sitting there in the dim dining room with Napa Valley glowing across my phone screen, I finally allowed myself to think the thought I had spent years avoiding. Maybe none of it had ever been accidental. The next morning, I woke up still wearing my sweater from the night before. My neck ached from falling asleep on the couch, and the television screen had gone black sometime during the night. For a few seconds I forgot what day it was. Then I saw the half-empty wine glass sitting on the coffee table beside my phone, and remembered everything all at once. The blocked calls. The empty chairs. The photo from Napa Valley. I sat there quietly while the house creaked around me in the pale morning light. Arthur always used to wake before me and make coffee. Even after 43 years of marriage, he never forgot exactly how I liked it. 1 spoonful of sugar. A little cream. The mornings felt colder without him. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and walked slowly into the kitchen. The roast from last night still sat inside the refrigerator untouched beside the lemon cake. I stared at it for a long moment before closing the door again. Around 8:30 my phone finally buzzed. My heart jumped before I even looked at the screen. Diane. Not Ryan. I answered immediately, trying to keep my voice steady. Good morning, I said softly. There was a short silence on the other end before my sister spoke. Helen. I did not realize you were alone last night. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. What do you mean? Another silence. Then a sigh. Vanessa told everyone you canceled dinner because you were not feeling well. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The wood felt cold beneath my fingertips. Cancelled. I repeated quietly. Diane sounded uncomfortable now. She texted the family Thursday morning. She said you wanted to celebrate another time because you were exhausted. I closed my eyes. Thursday morning was the same day Vanessa sent me that cheerful message confirming they were coming. See you tonight. The realization spread through me slowly, like cold water filling a sink. Did Ryan know? I asked. Diane hesitated just long enough to answer the question before she even spoke. I assumed he did. Outside the kitchen window, a neighbor walked his golden retriever down the sidewalk while sprinklers hissed softly across the lawns. Everything looked so painfully normal. Diane continued talking, her voice cautious now. Helen, I almost called you yesterday, but Vanessa said you needed rest after your doctor appointment. I frowned immediately. What doctor appointment? Diane stopped speaking altogether for a moment. Helen. She said you were having memory problems. I felt something inside me go very still. Not anger. Not even shock anymore. Just stillness. Last Christmas suddenly flashed through my mind with startling clarity. Vanessa correcting me sharply when I forgot where I placed the gravy boat. The concerned little smile she gave everyone afterward. Helen has been so forgetful lately. At the time I laughed along because I thought she was teasing. Then came Easter dinner, when Vanessa insisted on driving me home even though I had only had one glass of wine. We worry about you, she said gently while fastening my seatbelt like I was a child. Ting moments. Small comments. Little performances I ignored because decent people do not immediately assume cruelty in others. But now they lined up in my mind one after another like dominoes finally beginning to fall. Diane lowered her voice. Helen, I do not think this is just about dinner. Anymore. Neither did I. And for the first time since Arthur died, I began to understand how loneliness could be used not just as pain but as strategy. After I hung up with Diane, I remained at the kitchen table for nearly an hour without moving. The coffee in my mug turned cold beside me while morning sunlight crept slowly across the hardwood floor. My eyes kept drifting toward the refrigerator where the birthday cake still sat untouched behind the glass shelves. 70 years old, and somehow I felt younger and older at the same time. Young enough to still want my family. Old enough to recognize humiliation when I saw it. Around noon, I finally forced myself to shower and get dressed. I chose a simple beige sweater and jeans, the kind of outfit Arthur always called my running errands uniform. The grocery store was only 15 minutes away, but I needed to leave the house before the silence swallowed me whole. Outside, the October air carried that dry California chill that always reminded me summer was ending. As I drove through town, I caught myself checking my phone at every red light, even though I knew no messages were coming. Ryan still had not called. Neither had the children. At the grocery store, people smiled politely as they pushed carts through aisles stacked with pumpkins and cinnamon-scented candles. A young cashier wished me a belated happy birthday after glancing at the grocery rewards screen connected to my account. I smiled back automatically and thanked her like a normal person. That was the strange thing about betrayal. The world continued moving exactly the same while your own reality quietly cracked underneath you. I was reaching for a carton of milk when I heard someone call my name. Helen. I turned and saw Marianne Cooper walking toward me with a basket hanging from her arm. Marianne and I had volunteered together for years at the library fundraiser before Arthur passed away. She wore oversized sunglasses and a denim jacket despite the cool weather. How was Napa? She asked casually.
I blinkte her.
Excuse me. She stopped walking. Oh, I just assumed you were with your family this weekend. Vanessa posted so many beautiful pictures. My grip tightened around the milk carton. Marianne's smile faded immediately as she looked closer at my face. Helen, were you not there? I swallowed carefully.
No, ian suarat sufli.
Marianne looked genuinely uncomfortable now. I am sorry. I should not have assumed. But she kept talking, probably because decent people often speak too much when they become nervous. Vanessa said it was a birthday celebration trip for the whole family. She even joked online about finally getting everybody together. Birthday celebration. My birthday. I thanked Marianne politely and left the store without buying half the things on my list. The drive home felt longer than usual. At one stoplight, I suddenly remembered Chloe's dance recital 6 months earlier. Vanessa told me tickets had sold out too quickly, and there was no room left in the auditorium. 2 days later, I saw photos online of empty seats scattered throughout the front row. Another memory surfaced right after that. Mason's Little League game in June. Ryan promised to send me the schedule, but it never came. Vanessa later laughed and said she thought I needed more rest these days anyway. Tiny cuts. Tiny humiliations. Always wrapped in concern. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my chest felt heavy with something deeper than sadness. It was realization. Vanessa had not been separating me from the family all at once. She had been doing it slowly, carefully, one missing invitation at a time. And the most painful part was not that she had succeeded. It was that Ryan had allowed it to happen. 3 days passed before Ryan finally called me. By then, the flowers on my dining room table had already started to wilt. Their white petals curled inward at the edges, and the water in the vase had turned cloudy. I had not bothered changing it. Some part of me felt too tired to keep rescuing things that were already dying. His name appeared on my phone while I was folding laundry in the hallway. For a second, I simply stared at the screen. Then I answered. Mom. His voice sounded cheerful, careful, like someone stepping onto thin ice while pretending not to notice the cracks underneath. Hello, Ryan. Sorry I missed your birthday dinner, he said quickly. Things got kind of crazy up north. Up north. Not Napa Valley. Not the birthday trip Vanessa proudly posted online for everyone else to see. Just up north. I sat down slowly on the edge of the hallway bench beside Arthur's old coat rack. I see, I said softly. There was a pause. Vanessa said she tried calling you, he added. She thought maybe your phone was acting up again. I looked at the cell phone in my hand, the same phone that calmly informed me I had been blocked 4 nights earlier. My phone works fine, I replied. Another silence followed. Small. Tight. I could almost hear him thinking. Well, he finally said, clearing his throat. We should probably stop by sometime this week. The kids miss you. The lie settled heavily between us. Chloe and Mason used to call me every Sunday evening before Vanessa decided they were too busy with activities. Children do not wake up one morning and stop loving their grandmother all by themselves. Someone teaches them distance little by little. That would be nice, I answered anyway. After we hung up, I carried the folded towels upstairs and placed them inside the linen closet Arthur built 20 years ago. He used to spend entire weekends fixing things around the house even after working 50-hour weeks at the insurance office. Sometimes I still expected to hear his footsteps in the hallway. Later that afternoon my phone rang again. This time it was a number I did not recognize. Mrs. Whitmore? A woman asked politely after I answered. This is Angela from Golden Palms Senior Living. I frowned immediately. I believe you have the wrong number. Oh. Papers shuffled softly on her end of the line. I am calling regarding the consultation scheduled for next Tuesday. My stomach tightened.
Consultation.
Yes, ma'am. Your daughter-in-law requested information about our assisted living cottages and memory care options. For a moment, I genuinely could not speak. I stood frozen beside the kitchen counter while the afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the floor. I think there has been some misunderstanding, I finally said quietly. I did not request any consultation. The woman sounded embarrassed. I apologize, Mrs. Whitmore. Your daughter-in-law indicated the family was beginning transition planning. Transition planning. Such clean words for something so ugly. After we ended the call, I remained standing in the kitchen staring at nothing at all. Suddenly, dozens of little moments returned with painful clarity. Vanessa asking whether this house felt too big for one person. Ryan casually mentioning retirement communities near the coast. Vanessa insisting memory care waiting lists were getting longer every year. At the time I thought they were worried about me. Now I understood they had already started building a future for me without ever asking whether I wanted one. And somewhere deep inside that realization, beneath all the hurt and humiliation, something else quietly began to form. Not fear. Not grief. Awareness. That night I could not sleep. The house felt unusually quiet, even for a widow's home. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily through the darkness while I lay awake staring at the ceiling above my bed. Transition planning. Memory care options. The phrases kept circling through my mind like cold wind slipping under a door. Around 2 a.m, I finally got up and walked downstairs in my robe. The hardwood floors creaked softly beneath my feet as I crossed the living room toward Arthur's old study. I had not spent much time in there since he passed away 8 months earlier. The room still smelled faintly of cedarwood and black coffee. His brown leather chair sat angled slightly toward the bookshelf exactly the way he always left it after reading the newspaper. For a moment, grief caught me off guard so sharply that I had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. Then my eyes landed on the small brass key inside the top drawer. The safety deposit box key. Arthur believed in keeping important things organized. Paperwork protects people, he used to say whenever Ryan teased him about labeling every folder in the house. I remember laughing at that once. Now those words echoed differently in my head. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting across from Mr. Levinson at Pacific Trust Bank downtown. He had handled Arthur's accounts for nearly 20 years and wore the same wire-rim glasses and navy ties I remembered from every holiday party. His expression softened when he saw me. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, shaking my hand. "It has been too long." The safety deposit room smelled faintly of metal and dust. I sat alone at the small wooden table while the box rested open in front of me. Inside were neatly organized folders, insurance policies, property documents, old family photographs, and Arthur's handwriting everywhere. Careful, precise, familiar. My fingers paused when I noticed a sealed envelope with my name written across the front. Helen, only to be opened if something feels wrong. My chest tightened instantly. Arthur's handwriting looked so alive that for a second I could almost hear his voice. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a short letter dated 3 years earlier. "Helen, if you are reading this, then I need you to trust your instincts. I have noticed things changing with Ryan and Vanessa. Especially Vanessa. Be careful about signing anything quickly. I updated the trust structure after our conversation last spring. Mr. Levinson will explain everything if necessary. Most importantly, remember this house belongs to you for as long as you want it. No one decides your future except you." I stopped reading and pressed the paper against my chest while tears blurred the words beneath me. Arthur knew. Somehow, long before I did, he had already seen the direction things were moving. Mr. Levinson knocked softly before stepping back into the room. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said carefully, "there is something else I believe you should review." He handed me another folder. Inside were account access forms signed nearly 6 months earlier. Ryan had partial viewing access to one of my retirement accounts. My stomach dropped. I barely remembered signing the authorization during one of the many afternoons Vanessa insisted on helping organize paperwork after Arthur's passing. Looking back now, I realize she always arrived carrying folders and sticky notes and smiling patiently whenever I became overwhelmed. Efficient, helpful, calm, the perfect image of concern. But sitting there beneath the fluorescent lights of the bank vault, I finally understood something chilling. Vanessa had never been planning for my future. She had been planning for my absence. Something inside me changed after the meeting at the bank. The grief was still there. So was the loneliness. But beneath both of them, something colder had finally settled into place. Clarity. For months after Arthur died, I moved through my days like a woman walking underwater. I cried in grocery store parking lots. I forgot whether I had eaten lunch. Sometimes I would stand in the hallway outside our bedroom just staring at the closed door because going inside without him felt unbearable. Vanessa saw that version of me and mistook grief for weakness. That was her first mistake. The second was assuming I would stay confused forever. The following Monday morning, I woke up before sunrise for the first time in months. The house was dark and silent as I walked downstairs in my slippers and started a pot of coffee. Outside the kitchen window, the sky over the neighborhood slowly shifted from charcoal gray to pale blue. I stood there holding my mug with both hands while the sprinkler system clicked softly across the lawn. Arthur used to love mornings like this. "Best part of the day," he always said. "Nobody expects anything from you yet." By 9 o'clock, I was sitting once again inside Mr. Levinson's office downtown. This time I brought a notebook. I brought reading glasses. I brought questions. He seemed quietly relieved to see the difference in me. We spent nearly 2 hours reviewing every account, every signature authorization, every detail of the trust Arthur created before he passed. Most of the assets were still protected exactly the way Arthur intended. The house, the retirement investments, the life insurance funds. Vanessa had not gotten nearly as far as she thought she had. But she had been trying. That much became painfully obvious. "Mrs. Whitmore," Mr. Levinson said carefully at one point, sliding a document across the desk, "I strongly recommend removing all secondary access immediately." I looked down at Ryan's signature on the authorization form. My son's handwriting looked older now than I remembered. Sharper. Less familiar somehow. "Can this be done quietly?" I asked. Mr. Levinson gave a small nod. Very quietly. I signed the paperwork slowly and carefully. One account after another. New passwords. New authorizations. New instructions. Every signature felt strangely calm. Not emotional. Not dramatic. Just necessary. Afterward, I stopped at a small diner near the courthouse and ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. The waitress called me sweetheart twice and refilled my cup without asking. Around me, people chatted about traffic, football games, and weekend plans while country music played softly from an old speaker near the register. Ordinary life. It struck me then how long it had been since I sat somewhere alone without feeling pitted. My phone buzzed while I was buttering my toast. Vanessa. I stared at her name lighting up the screen. Then I answered. Helen, she said warmly. Her voice dipped in that same practiced sweetness she used whenever other people were listening. We were thinking maybe the family could come by Friday night. The kids really miss you. I looked out the diner window at the busy street beyond the glass. Friday sounds lovely, I replied calmly. I would love to see everyone. Wonderful, she said quickly. We can also talk about a few practical things while we are there. Just future planning stuff. Future planning. Again. I smiled faintly to myself though she could not see it. Of course, I answered softly. I think it is finally time we talk about the future too. After we hung up, I took another sip of coffee and realized something surprising. For the first time since my 70th birthday, my hands were no longer shaking. Friday evening arrived warm and unusually quiet. The sun hung low over the neighborhood, casting long golden shadows across the front lawns while I set the dining room table for dinner once again. This time my hands moved steadily. No trembling. No nervous checking of the clock every 5 minutes. I used the same cream-colored plates from my birthday dinner, but somehow the room felt different. Now, less hopeful. More awake. I placed a roast chicken in the center of the table beside a bowl of garlic potatoes and roasted carrots. Simple food. Familiar food. The kind Arthur always loved on Friday nights after long work weeks. At exactly 6:15, headlights pulled into the driveway. I watched through the front window as Ryan climbed out of the driver's seat, while Vanessa adjusted her hair in the passenger mirror before stepping onto the sidewalk. Chloe and Mason hurried behind them carrying a bakery box tied with red ribbon. The image looked so normal it almost hurt. When I opened the front door, Chloe threw her arms around my waist immediately. "Grandma, we brought cheesecake," she announced proudly. I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "That was very thoughtful, sweetheart." Mason hugged me next, though more carefully now that he was entering that awkward age where boys become shy about affection. Ryan stepped forward last. He smelled faintly of aftershave and cedarwood, just like Arthur used to. For one painful second it nearly broke my composure. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "You look good." Vanessa smiled warmly beside him. Perfect posture. Perfect makeup. Perfect concern shining behind her eyes. "Helen, your house looks beautiful as always." I thanked her politely and stepped aside so they could enter. Dinner moved slowly at first. Chloe talked about soccer practice. Mason described a science project involving model volcanoes. Ryan discussed work deadlines between bites of chicken while Vanessa laughed gently at all the appropriate moments. Watching them felt strangely surreal, like sitting inside a family photograph someone else staged for display. Halfway through dinner, Vanessa finally placed her napkin carefully beside her plate and glanced toward Ryan before turning to me. There it was. The transition. Smooth. Practiced. "Helen," she began softly, "Ryan and I have been thinking a lot about what is best for you long term." I took a slow sip of iced tea before setting my glass down. "Have you?" "Of course," she continued warmly. "We just worry sometimes. This house is very large for one person, and after the confusion with your birthday dinner." She let the sentence trail off delicately. Ryan shifted slightly beside her but said nothing. "Confusion," I repeated calmly. Vanessa offered a sympathetic smile. "We know grieving can make things overwhelming. Forgetting details. Missing messages. We only want to make sure you are supported." Supported. Such a polite word for being managed. I looked toward Ryan then. My son avoided my eyes and focused instead on cutting his chicken into smaller pieces. The silence stretched across the table for several long seconds before I finally stood up. Vanessa's expression brightened slightly, almost relieved, as though she believed the difficult part of the conversation was ending exactly the way she expected. "Excuse me one moment," I said quietly. I walked upstairs to Arthur's study and opened the top drawer of his desk. Inside rested the blue folder Mr. Levinson prepared earlier that week. I picked it up carefully, then paused for just a second beside Arthur's empty leather chair. "You were right," I whispered softly into the stillness of the room. Then I carried the folder downstairs. I returned to the dining room carrying the blue folder against my chest, while the sound of silverware and polite conversation slowly faded into silence. Ryan looked up first. Vanessa followed a second later, her smile tightening ever so slightly when she noticed the expression on my face. Calmness unsettled people more than anger ever could. I sat back down carefully at the head of the table and placed the folder beside my plate. The dining room suddenly felt very still. Even the children seemed to sense something shifting beneath the surface of the evening. Chloe quietly took another bite of cheesecake while Mason stared down at his folded napkin. Vanessa recovered first, of course. She always did. "Helen," she said gently, "we only want what is best for you." I nodded slowly. "I know." Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. Ryan finally looked at me directly for the first time all evening. There was exhaustion in his eyes now, and guilt. But not enough guilt to stop what had already been happening. "Mom," he began quietly, "maybe we should all just talk openly. Nobody is trying to hurt you." Hurt me. Such an interesting choice of words. Like all of this had simply happened by accident. Like birthdays disappeared on their own. Like phone numbers blocked themselves. I folded my hands neatly in front of me before speaking. "Last Tuesday," I said calmly, "I received a phone call from Golden Palms Senior Living." The color shifted almost imperceptibly in Vanessa's face. Ryan blinked once, confused. "What?" he asked, turning toward his wife. Vanessa's expression remained composed, but I noticed the way her fingers tightened around the stem of her water glass. "Helen," she said carefully, "we only requested information because we were thinking ahead. That is all." "Without asking me?" I replied softly. "We were concerned," she insisted quickly, "after the confusion with your birthday dinner and some of the memory lapses lately." "What memory lapses?" Ryan interrupted suddenly. The room went quiet again. Vanessa turned toward him with controlled patience. "Ryan, your mother has clearly been overwhelmed lately." I watched my son carefully then. Watched the uncertainty flicker across his face. Tiny cracks beginning to form beneath years of careful manipulation. I opened the folder and removed several documents before sliding them slowly across the table toward him. "I visited Pacific Trust Bank this week," I said. Ryan glanced down at the paperwork. His eyes moved quickly over the pages before his expression changed completely. "Mom, I revoked all account access authorizations," I continued evenly. "Every single one." Vanessa sat perfectly still now. Too still. "I also updated my trust." Ryan looked up sharply. "Updated it how?" I met his eyes calmly. "The house, investment accounts, and all remaining assets are now protected under a new estate structure managed independently through the bank." Vanessa finally spoke again, though her voice sounded thinner now beneath the strain. "Helen, there is no reason to make emotional decisions." "This is not emotional," I interrupted quietly. "That is exactly why I waited until now." The silence that followed stretched so long I could hear the grandfather clock ticking softly in the hallway. Ryan stared down at the documents again while understanding slowly settled across his face piece by piece. Then finally, almost in a whisper, he asked the question I think he had been avoiding for a very long time. "Mom, did Vanessa really block your number?" Vanessa turned toward him immediately. "Ryan, that is not what happened." But he was already looking at her differently now. Not with trust. Not even with anger yet. Just realization. I leaned back slightly in my chair and looked around the dining room one final time. The same table where I spent decades serving birthday dinners, Christmas meals, and Sunday roasts for the people I loved most in the world. Then I looked directly at my daughter-in-law. "You did not just block my phone number, Vanessa," I said softly. "You spent years trying to erase me from my own family." Nobody spoke after that. Outside, the porch light cast a pale glow across the front lawn while somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once into the quiet California night. And for the first time in a very long while, I no longer felt invisible.